You are listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe of Torch in Houston, Texas. This is the Parsha Review Podcast.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to the Parsha Review Podcast. This week's Parsha is Parshas Tazria and Parshas Metzorah. They are combined. We're going to speak about something very important that we see in the beginning of Parshas Tazria. The first verse, chapter 12, verse number 1. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar, and Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying the following: Daber el bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. Lemar, as follows: Isha ki Tazria v'yolda zachor, a woman when she conceives and she gives birth to a male, v'tama shivas yamim kimeni dasa devosa titma. She shall be contaminated for a 7-day period, as during the days of her separation, infirmity, shall she be contaminated. So, obviously, as we know, and we talk about every single week, there's a lot to talk about, there's a lot to unpack here. But let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says something really incredible. Amar Rav Simlai says, and this is from the Midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, it says, Kishem sheyitzirah shel Adam achar kol behema chayavov, just like the creation of man, Adam and Eve, was after the creation of all of the animals, all of the birds, all of the fish, all of creation, b'ma'aseh bereishis, in the beginning of creation, in the 6 days of creation, kach toraso nisparsha achar Torah's behema chayav of. So too, the purity of man comes after we talk about the purity of animals, the purity of, like we mentioned last week, we had all of the laws of kosher. What is a kosher animal? What is not a kosher animal? What is a kosher fish? What is not a kosher fish? What birds can we eat? What birds can we not eat? Etc., etc. So just as in creation, the order of creation was all of the animals and then mankind, so too, when we talk about purity, we talk about the animals' purity, what animals are pure, what are impure, and then we talk about the purity of mankind and the impurities of mankind. And there are different levels of impurity. We know we get into this in greater detail in our Parsha Review, where we talk about the different parts of different levels of impurity. Like the highest level of impurity is someone who comes in contact with a corpse. A Kohen, of which we have 2 here in the room. A Kohen is prohibited from spiritually defiling themselves and coming in contact with a corpse. Someone else, a Yisrael, someone who's not a Kohen, who comes in contact, they are on the highest level of impurity and they need to cleanse themselves for 7 days. It's a whole process. It's a whole process of how they cleanse themselves. Okay. So I just say something very, very important. You know, there's a story that's told. Someone once came to his spiritual master and he says, Rabbi, you know, I need a blessing that my children be righteous people. So the rabbi says, you come to me now? Come to me now after your children are already born? He says, it's like coming to me and saying, I want my apple tree to produce oranges. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because it depends on the seeds that you plant into that tree. You reap what you sow. And if you plant apples, an apple tree will grow. And if you plant oranges will grow. So what he was saying was, whatever you planted in for your children is what they will grow to be. You plant them to be holy and righteous, that's what they'll be. I want to just take this another level in a very practical way. What we feed our children, and this is on a daily basis, what we feed our children is what they will grow. And this is both on a physical level and on a spiritual level. If we feed our children healthy things, they'll grow to be healthy. We feed them, now on a spiritual level, good things spiritually, they'll grow to be spiritual. It's such an important and powerful lesson for us to understand that it doesn't just, someone merited to have a very, very righteous child. It doesn't just have. I'll give you the story. I'll tell you the story of my own grandfather. My grandfather of blessed memory was known as a very, very big, righteous, pious man. But he didn't grow up in a religious home. Far from it. His parents were not religious. His parents did not keep Shabbos. His parents did not study Torah. But his mother was a very righteous woman. And when I asked my grandfather, how did he become something? So the first thing he said, I'm nothing. I'm a nobody. But then I said, okay, cut it. Okay, you became something great. Look, you had a yeshiva with thousands of students. He's quoted in every book you look today about parenting, about psychology, about relationships. They quote, every Jewish book will quote Rabbi Wolbe, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. You became something. How did that happen? You came from a family that had nothing. Spiritually, religiously, didn't go to synagogue. So how did that happen? See, he said, every morning when my mother tied my shoes, she whispered into my ears, go be a Torah scholar. Go learn Torah. Go become a tzaddik. And those prayers sunk in. Those were her prayers, hoping, because she grew up in a religious home, but there was a lot of, people who were, I guess, assimilating with secular Judaism. And what could she do? People say love is love. The only guy she could marry wasn't a yeshiva boy. She married a secular guy. And they lived a secular life. But she still desired, she had a deep desire. She wanted her child to grow up to be a righteous Torah scholar. So she put that prayer in. And you reap what you sow. It's such an important, we can't expect our children to have, and I'm going to talk about the modern day slavery, and that is these devices, these phones, technology. We cannot, I'll be very, very particular, we cannot expect our children to have access to TikTok and to all of these other things and expect them to not be influenced by the negative influences of social media. It won't happen. We cannot expect for them not to want to dress like the influencers, for them to not talk like the influencers, for them not to act like the influencers that are influencing them. So we're wondering why we have a crumbling society, we're in moral decay, when this is what we're exposing our children to. We shouldn't be at all in any question about why they're being influenced in such a way. This is something which is, I think, fundamental for us to understand, that exactly what we plant is what will grow. And if we just say, I'm going to turn a blind eye, just going to let them. It used to be the television, but today television is so lame. You can go on internet, you can find anything in the world that you want. By the way, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of good. There are a lot of things that we can benefit from online. But with that comes a danger. Every good has an equal bad. So we're not saying lock your children up in the room and don't give them access to the world and deprive them of all. No, but there has to be, you have to train your child. Just like No one can, expect to know how to drive without driving driver's ed. You teach them how to drive. You teach them how to turn. You teach them how to make a U-turn, how to K-turn. Teach them how to merge into traffic. Teach them how to, change lanes. These are very important things. You have to train them. We have to train our children about their own spiritual protection online. So that's the spiritual aspect of it. But there's also a physical aspect of it. Our sages tell us that the food we eat has an impact on us. So what we put in is what grows within us. We think food is physical. I eat a lot, I become overweight. And that's the way the story goes. If I work out, we had over here a whole mathematics class last week, 2 weeks. As long as your output is more than your intake, you'll lose weight. Right, Ed? That was your lesson. Right? As long as you work out, you eat less, you will lose weight. That's not always the case, but it's okay. Let's say that's the situation. Food does not equal physical. This is something our Torah teaches us. Food equals spiritual. There's some people have mistaken opinions about kosher, for example. Oh, you know what kosher food is? It means blessed by a rabbi. Kosher does not mean blessed by a rabbi. Far from it. Kosher means that this is supervised, that this follows what the Torah says is food that is good for your soul. Because you know what the Talmud says, a very frightening story. Talmud says that there was a great Kohen Gadol. His name was Yochanan Kohen Gadol. He was the high priest who brought offerings in the temple for 80 years. 80 years he was the high priest. And after 80 years, he became a heretic and served idolatry. And the question asked is, how is it possible? How is it possible that someone who was in the Holy of Holies, by the way, in Yom Kippur, you know what happens in the Holy of Holies? If you had one wrong thought, if 1 ounce of you wasn't pure connection to the Almighty, you would die on the spot. 80 years he passed that test. 80 years. And suddenly he went awry. How does that happen? You know who asks this question? The Arizal. The Arizal says, how is it possible? The great Kabbalist says, how is it possible that someone for 80 years passed the test of the Holy of Holies? You know that they would tie a string to the leg of the high priest before he went into the Holy of Holies. And the string would be all the way outside of the Holy of Holies in case he died. Because if he had one impure thought, boom, done. He couldn't withstand the holiness of that place, and he would die on the spot. So that way they'd pull his body out if he died. 80 years, Yochanan Kohen Gadol passed that test. And then he goes to idolatry. How does that work? The Rizal says, the verse says, V'lo titamu bohem v'nitmeisem bam. Do not become impure from those foods that you eat. He says, don't call it v'nitmeisem, but rather v'nitamtem. Don't become crazy. Don't not become impure. Don't become crazy. He just changes how you organize the letters. Don't read it and you shall not become impure, but rather don't become crazy. What are you talking about? Eating non-kosher food creates a spiritual barrier that makes you crazy. And when a person has a barrier that limits them from connecting spiritually, usually it's because we've allowed ourselves to be infiltrated by things that are unkosher, but things that are unholy spiritually, and they create this blockade. And then suddenly we wonder why there are so many Jewish people, sadly, our brothers and sisters, who are busy with everything in the world that's just crazy. Saving the whales and saving the dolphins and saving the turtles. They're all Jewish. You know why? Because their neshama is so clogged with stupidity, with all the non-kosher, that they don't even know what is right and what is wrong. Their measure of good and bad is completely confused. And this is something which our Torah is teaching us. We need to protect ourselves and protect our children. You know why? Kosher isn't the Jewish tax. You have to understand that there's much more labor involved in something which is kosher than something which is not kosher. All right? I'll give you an example. About 10, 15 years ago, I got a phone call from the Chicago Rabbinic Council. And they are known, the CRC is a very, very, probably one of the most reputable kosher agencies in the world. They said, we just got a new contract with a company in Houston, and we don't have a representative in Houston to go check on this facility. Can you do it for us, at least temporarily? Now, I don't really like doing any side jobs and side things. I said, fine, I'll do it. It was a cousin of mine that called me. I said, fine. So he came down, he flew down, and he took me to the plant. It was like a few minutes from my house. It was actually amazing. It was like sometimes you can travel 3 hours for these plants. So no, it was 7 minutes, 8 minutes from my house. And I went into the plant with this individual, and we met the owner, and we met the manager, and we met the this and that. We went through all of the details. What do they make in this plant? They make potato chips, and they make corn chips, and they make all of these different types of chips. And basically, they had the raw material of the chips, meaning the unflavored, and then they put the flavorings in the machine, and then it went through some process of deep frying them or whatever, however they in the oil with all the flavorings, and then it dried up and it went straight into the bags and it was packed and put into boxes and it goes to the stores. Okay, now how do we know that everything from the potatoes or the corn chips or whatever it is that they're making and all of the ingredients, that they're all kosher? So you have these big, what do you call those? The big tubs, right? Those big, what? Big barrels. Yeah, these big barrels. And each barrel comes from a manufacturer who makes those ingredients, who makes those chips. And this is the plant that they blend the two together. So I would go through the entire warehouse, no air conditioning, so that wasn't so pleasant. I'd go through the whole warehouse and I'd have to see every single barrel and make sure every barrel was the right ID number, the right everything, to make sure that this was the right ingredient that was certified kosher. And then I would look at all the logs of every single run that was put through those machines and make sure that the right ingredients with the right, everything was put together and it was done properly, and that the oil was changed, because everything needs to be logged, and making sure that this product that you buy in the store and you look at it and you see, oh, this is CRC certified, it's got to be kosher. Well, what goes into that? It's hours and hours of someone going and making sure that every step of the process is indeed kosher. Now, what happens if there was a mistake? Which I found. I found a mistake where they didn't change out the oil from doing the pork rinds. It's a big problem now. We got to pull all of those chips that ran on that line. After you have to log it, everything is logged. So we had to pull all of those. Thank God they weren't shipped yet, but all of those thrown out, not kosher. You understand? It's a big process. It's a very big process. So yeah, it may cost you a little bit more to buy a kosher product. But you know what you're guaranteed? You're going to get a much cleaner product. It's guaranteed that you will have, it doesn't mean that whole kosher food is healthy, by the way. It does not mean that every product we buy is healthy for us. There are plenty of overweight people who keep kosher. There are plenty of people who have heart failure because of the food habits, even though the food is kosher. But spiritual blockage is more important than physical. And that's something that's something we can ensure with kosher food. Yeah, halacha talks about overeating, and it's a terrible thing. Even overeating, by the way, the healthiest foods, organic, vegetables, is also not good if you overeat. Right? There's not only bad foods that are fatty and whatever. Okay, we're not going to get into that. It's not a diet show here. But even healthy foods, if we overeat, it's not good. But you know what else we learned from this? By the way, the process of chicken getting to the kosher butcher. You go to the deli counter in Randall's and H-E-B. You go to the kosher butcher or Harova, all of the kosher establishments here in Houston that carry kosher food. You know the process to get that chicken? They don't use a stun gun to kill that chicken. It has to be properly slaughtered. It has to be rinsed. It has to be salted. It has to be soaked. It has to be washed. It's an entire process. It's a lot of manpower. It's got to be done properly. You can't just say, "Oh, I told the workers to do it." No. You have to. It's got to be done by you. The supervisor, the kosher supervisor, has to ensure. And when you go to a kosher restaurant, it's not just a chef serving you food. You got to make sure that every ingredient that walks into that place, every ingredient is certified to be kosher. That the chicken, that the fish, that the meat, that the cheese, that the dough, everything. Okay, it's a whole investigation, yet to make sure that you can trust it, that it's reliable for you. But you know what the funny thing is? I'll tell you the craziest thing. It's really bad marketing, by the way. If you're ever a marketing major, you're a marketing major, right? Don't do this, okay? Don't ever do this. So H-E-B had a flyer. I have a copy of it. I had a flyer. This is maybe 15 years ago as well. They put out, it was when they were here, the pantry H-E-B, right across the street here on South Braeswood and Chimney Rock. So they had an advertisement for regular prime rib. And they had, non-kosher was, I think it was $2.99 a pound. On the same exact page, it had kosher prime rib, $5.99 a pound. Don't put them next to each other, okay? Just like don't do that. You can put in the kosher section on the back page. You can do that, but don't put them one next to the other. Why? Because we're going to have the consumers going to say, 1 second. If I can buy a kosher consumer, if I can buy kosher for $5.99 and non-kosher for $2.99, which one do you think I'm going to get? Right? Of course, someone who's committed to the laws of kosher doesn't make a difference. If you give it to us for free, we're not going to touch non-kosher food. But for someone who is tempted, why would they buy the kosher? But let me ask you, the greatest gift that Hashem has ever given us for kosher is Whole Foods, Central Market. You know why? Because some doctor said that organic is healthier. Some doctor said that. We're not talking about God. We're talking about a doctor. And by the way, New York Times had an article where they did hundreds of studies on organic food, and they have zero proof, zero evidence that organic is healthier. They couldn't find one source that organic was healthier, that it was better for you. But some doctor said organic is better. It's healthier. So people are ready to spend, instead of $4 for a box of cereals, they're ready to spend $28 for a box of cereal. Because some doctor said it's healthier for you. But what happened to the kosher, not kosher? What happened to paying a little bit more because it's better for you? God doesn't know what he's talking about. The doctor knows. Right? So if a doctor said, organic, I'm ready to spend an extra $25. But if God said, what does God know? And you see the amazing contrast. Where if it's just $3 more a pound, it's the Jew tax. But if it's organic, it's not the rabbi tax. It's not the health freaks tax. No. Everybody knows organic is better for you. Really? My dear friends, let's not get carried away. Let's not get carried away. There's no need to get carried away. The Torah is given to us as a document of love from the Almighty. And he tells us, listen, you reap what you sow. If you put in healthy, you put in spiritually good stuff, you know what will come out of it? Hopefully someone who's spiritually guided, someone who's able to connect spiritually, someone who's not spiritually contaminated. That's the goal here. It is so important for us to be cautious, not to put something into our mouth that will create spiritual blockages. This is what the Torah is telling us. The Torah is telling us, I created all those animals. I created all of those fowl. I created all of those fish. Be careful what you put in. Because what you put in is what comes out. And when you put in something which is good for you, by the way, we learn about this from all of the animals. The Midrash says, a very interesting Midrash. The Midrash says that all of the animals have characteristics. For example, birds of prey are not kosher. Why? Because they're very aggressive. They're aggressive. If we eat it, we'll become aggressive like them. Don't eat them. So the Midrash says, I don't understand. The eagle is known as one of the most merciful animals. One of the most merciful. The Midrash says that when the young mother goat kicks its young off the cliff, the eagle sees that, flies, catches the young, and brings it back up to the mother. And then the mother doesn't try it again. That's how merciful the eagle is. So the Midrash asks, I don't understand. Then we should eat the eagle. It should be kosher. Yeah, it's a little bit aggressive, but it has such a high level of mercy. Something that's enviable. Sages tell us it's true that it has a tremendous amount of mercy, but it's out of balance. It's too much mercy. We will go crazy, the Midrash says, if we had that level of mercy in our tool chest. It's too much. But we see what the underlying lesson here is that there is an influence into our essence, into who we become by what we eat. And this is our responsibility to ensure that the food we eat, that the intake, not only the food, the intake, the influence that we allow in our lives, that they be good influences. Because if we surround ourselves by good influences, we will be influenced positively. And if we put ourselves in a place where there's negative influence, we will become negative. We're influenced by our environment. We're influenced by our intake. If what we see, which takes in, our eyes take in information all the time, if we see bad things, has a very, very strong likelihood we become. So they say that children who see violence, watch violence, become violent. It's an amazing thing. Just watching violence, the children become violent. They become more aggressive. We're influenced by our environment. We have to be so cautious. And this is what the Torah, in one little verse, is teaching us here. The importance of securing our environment, securing our influences. And God willing, Hashem should bless us all, that we should merit to only take in good things, that we should only be influenced in the most positive way, with goodness and with positive influences. Amen. Thank you, Howard. That's an excellent reminder of a story. Maybe you didn't hear the story. You hear the story? We lived in Brooklyn, New York, when I was, we moved from Israel when I was about 3 years old. And we lived in Brooklyn till I was 10 years old. But why did we suddenly move to Israel? Move from Brooklyn, New York to Monsey, upstate New York. Nice rural community. Today it's no more rural. There's so many Jews moving in there. Oh my goodness, wow. But why did we do that? Why did my parents move there? So one day I had a fight with my brother. As brotherly love, we got into a little skirmish. And I allegedly got upset at my brother and used a foul word that should never be uttered by any human being, let alone a nice little Jewish boy. And my mother was shocked. And my mother said, okay, you wait till your daddy gets home. And my father came home. And my father surprisingly did not punish me. My father very, very lovingly sat with me on the front porch of our home. I remember this as clear as day. East 3rd Street between Cortelio and C in Brooklyn, New York. We lived right diagonally across from a public school. So my father lovingly sat with me, put me on his lap, and he said to me, so mommy told me that you got into a little fight and that you used a word that should never be used. I'm not upset at you for using that word. I'm not upset at you for using that word. I just want to know where you learned that word. Where did you learn that word? So I pointed right across the street. I said, right there, in that public schoolyard, right? Every day I'd come home from school. What would we do? We'd go play baseball. We'd play stickball. We'd play slapball. We'd play football. We'd play basketball. With who? With my African-American neighbors, with my Puerto Rican neighbors, with my Italian neighbors. That's who we'd play with. And what words would they use if they struck out? Those words. What words would they use if they shot the basket and missed? Those words. That's where I learned those words from. My father said, okay, those are not the words we use. Try to avoid using such words, words, the mouth that speaks words of Torah should try to limit using words that are impure, that are not clean. That Shabbos, that very Shabbos, we went to Monsey, New York. And we went to go visit friends for Shabbos. And my parents, after Shabbos, called a realtor, and they started looking at homes, and a few weeks later, we moved to Monsey. Why? Because in Monsey, you don't have public schools. In Monsey, you don't have those influences. Where we lived, after that move, we didn't have the influence of a non-Jewish world influencing us. Were there not people who spoke like that? 1 in a million. But it wasn't an everyday. You can't expect your child to be different than the environment you're putting him in. And my father was 100% right. You cannot expect your child to act differently than the environment you're putting him in. What's funny is that about 15 years later, I was married and living in Jerusalem, and I ate with my wife. We ate by my grandparents. Shabbos dinner. And after the meal, my grandparents said, we're going to walk you a little bit. So my grandmother was walking with my wife. my grandfather was walking with me, and we were talking. We're walking in the streets of Jerusalem. And my grandfather tells me, he says, you know, your father, he is a genius in raising children. And he told me this story, not knowing that it was me. He told me this. He says, one of his kids once said a word he should never say, and he didn't blame the child. He blamed the environment. See, he moved to a new city. Because you don't blame the child for the environment you put him in. And I think it really is a powerful lesson. Thank you, Howard, for reminding me of the story. If you put yourself or your child in an environment that's not going to be flattering, that's not going to be positive, you can't expect yourself to act differently. You know, the Mishnah tells us in Ethics of Our Fathers that someone once came to the great rabbi and he says, Rabbi, we want you to come live in our city with us, be with us, come join us. He says, no. If you say you wanted me to be your rabbi and you'll all come to a place that is a good community, but you want me to be among you, no, that's not going to work. Right? It means a person needs to know their environment. I think this is the 5th chapter in Ethics of Our Fathers. A person must always put themselves in an environment that's going to be virtuous, that's going to be meritorious for them, and it's going to give them added benefit. I just want to add one more thing, if we're already talking about this. You know, there's something called a Gemach. You know what a Gemach is? A Gemach is a free loan society. Okay, but that's not really what it is. Gemach comes from the word Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. And imagine the following. Someone is making a bris for a baby boy, mazel tov. So now, you know, there's a special pillow that you're supposed to put the baby, the big white pillow. It's a beautiful big pillow. So I don't have that white pillow. So what am I going to do? So I go out and buy the pillow. Expensive. I go buy the special pillow. I buy the special pillow case, the cover. I want it to be so beautiful, my baby's bris. Or the baby's outfit, which they'll only wear once. Right? That white, beautiful outfit. Okay, so now what do I do with it? I throw it out? No. Acts of loving kindness. I open up a gemach. A gemach. Free loan. Anybody who wants to borrow can borrow the outfit for their baby boy. Because most baby boys are not different sizes. It's usually one size. They're all tiny, right? I don't have to make a whole. How about wedding gowns? A girl gets married. They design a beautiful wedding gown. And now what? She going to wear it again? I hope not. Right? So what is she going to do with it? They give it to a gemach. And it's rented out for free. At people who cannot afford $14,000, $15,000 for a designer Isaac Mizrahi custom tailored wedding gown, they can get one for free. And it's just as beautiful as it's unbelievable. Do you know how many gemachs there are in the community? I'm not talking about Brooklyn. I'm not talking about the big Jewish communities, Lakewood. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Houston, Texas. There's a table gemach. There's a chair gemach. There's a bris gemach. There is a shiva gemach. You know, shiva chairs. Right? It's a special chair that's low. It's comfortable. You're going to be sitting there 12 hours a day. Right? During the 7 days of mourning. You need special siddurim. There's a whole gemach for it. Right? Free. We have medical device gemach. Hey, someone needs a wheelchair. Someone needs a knee scooter. Someone needs you name crutches. In Israel, they have a very amazing gemach. Anybody here ever have leftover medicine? Yeah, we all have in our cabinet leftover medicine. What are you going to do with that? Usually we throw it out. There's a Gemach which is legal. Who has a doctor managing this Gemach, that someone who had leftover amoxicillin, they have 10 extra pills. Don't throw it out. Someone else who can't afford it can benefit from that. And if they have a prescription, right, they can get it filled free by Howard's leftovers. Is that amazing? When you are in such a community, you can't help yourself but start thinking of ways to be kind. Start thinking of ways. Imagine they have a gemach for work outfits. Okay, someone's going for a job interview, right? They can't afford to buy a new outfit for their job interview. There's a gemach for that. They have, for labor, there's a special amulet, a special gem that has special powers, our sages tell us, that can help you have an easier labor. When my wife was due, we called up that gemach and we borrowed that amulet, so she wore it to have an easy labor. I don't know if it was easier than it would have been. I probably was. But it's amazing. And in communities where people don't have cell phones, there are many communities, by the way, religious communities, where people are very concerned about their spiritual intake. They don't have any phones. So what do they do if their wife needs them to take them to the hospital because they're about to deliver a baby? They have a beeper gemach. They didn't get it from Hezbollah. Don't worry, it's not going to blow up on them. Okay? But they have a beeper gemach. It's an unbelievable... Because I once needed it, so now why should I just throw it out? Someone else can benefit from it. And we have many dozens and dozens and dozens of organizations that help with every type of need you can possibly imagine. Because as a people, this is our essence, kindness. To be kind and to never stop thinking of ways to be kind for one another. So this is just a little added bonus content here. And probably nobody's going to get to the end of the podcast here. Anyway, if you are, give us a shout out. Email me. I'd love to know that people are actually listening to this far in. But either way, my dear friends, let's get involved in being in a good, solid environment. Okay? Thank you so much. This concludes this week's Parsha Review Podcast.
You've been listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe on a podcast produced by Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. Please help sponsor an episode so we can continue to produce more quality Jewish content for our listeners around the globe. Please visit torchweb.org to donate and partner with us on this incredible endeavor.